Welcome back, slave narrative lovers. I hope you missed Harriet Jacobs as much as I missed her in the incidents in the life of a slave girl. So we're up to chapter 22. Yep, Harriet wrote a long thing. And we're in Christmas festivities. That's the title of the chapter. And I'm dreaming of a black Christmas. Are you? Christmas was approaching. Grandmother brought me materials and I busied myself making some new garments and little playthings for my children. Were it not that hiring day is near at hand, and many families are fearfully looking forward to the probability of separation in a few days, Christmas might be a happy season for the poor slaves. So hiring day is during that time when they were sold off to new plantations or hired out. But the problem is that people were separated from their loved ones. And that was, so there's this sadness in a time that there should be happiness. You know, something like there is now in the US? Yeah, sadness in a holiday season coming up when there should be happiness, where people are being starved. Yeah. Continuing, even slave mothers try to gladden the hearts of their little ones on that occasion. Benny and Ellen had their Christmas stockings filled, so Benny and Ellen are her children. Their imprisoned mother could not have the privilege of witnessing their surprise and joy, so she's still in the attic, the little box that's almost like a coffin where she's exposed to the elements. But I had the pleasure of peeping at them as they went into the street with their new suits on. I heard Benny ask a little playmate whether Santa Claus brought him anything. "Yes," replied the boy, "but Santa Claus ain't a real man. It's the children's mothers that put things into the stockings." "No, that can't be," replied Benny, "for Santa Claus brought Ellen and me these clothes, and my mother has been gone this long time." So you see things. This is the first sound where you see the breakdown of the black family already, that it's the mother who has to put things because there's no father, but there's no father not of a choice, but the father of, because of the system, right? How I longed to tell him that his mother made those garments and that many a tear fell on them while she worked. Every child rises early on Christmas morning to see the John Canoes. Without them, Christmas would be shorn or robbed of its greatest attraction. They consist of companies of slaves from the plantation, generally of the lower class. This is something I can't take with Harriet Jacobs sometimes. It's this, she's enslaved, but she has this classist worldview that she thinks there are gradations of slavery. She, I think, maybe thinks she's upper class slave and lower class slave. But maybe there's just slaves, no lower and no upper. Two athletic men, so she's describing the Jonconers. Two athletic men in calico wrappers have a net thrown over them covered with all manners of bright colored strips. Cowtails are fastened on their backs and their heads are decorated with horns. A box covered with sheepskin is called the gumbo box. A dozen beat on this, while others strike triangles and jawbones, to which bands of dancers keep time. For a month previous, they're composing songs which are sung on this occasion. These companies of 100 each turn out early in the morning and are allowed to go around till 12 o'clock begging for contributions. Not a door is left unvisited where there's the least chance of obtaining a penny or a glass of rum. They do not drink while they're up, but carry the rum home in jugs to have a carousal. These Christmas donations frequently amount to $20 or $30. It is seldom that any white man or child refuses to give them a trifle. If he does, they regale his ears with the following song. "Poor massa, so they say, down in the hills, so they say, got no money, so they say, not 1 shilling, so they say, God Almighty bless you, so they say." Of course, that's not the tune to the song, but I just like to mix it up. Yeah, so continuing, Christmas is a day of feasting, both with white and colored people. Slaves who are lucky enough to have a few shillings are sure to spend them for good eating, and many a turkey and pig is captured without saying buy your leave, sir. Stolen. But how is it stolen if it's your labor that bought it? Guanya? Those who cannot obtain these cook a possum or a raccoon roadkill, for which savory dishes can be made. From which savory dishes can be made. My grandmother raised poultry and pigs for sale, and it was her established custom to have both a turkey and a pig roasted for Christmas dinner. So you know she's living large, her grandmother, more than even some poor whites were living. On this occasion I was warned to keep extremely quiet this Christmas dinner because two guests had been invited. One was the town constable and the other was a free colored man who tried to pass himself off for white and who was always ready to do any mean work for the sake of curry favor with white people. So again, you see complexionism and proximity to whiteness and the desire to use that as a ticket to get somewhere. And I would be okay if you didn't use it against your own people as a way to harm them. You can get somewhere if you need to pass to get somewhere with your complexion, but not at other people's expense. And sometimes it's just like black police officers in the blue gang of cops that sometimes they are meaner to people, black people, than the white cops because they have to prove that they're blue, right? They're part of the blue wall. Same thing with passing black people. They have to prove they're whiter than the white people in terms of oppression. My grandmother had a motive for inviting them. She managed to take them all over the house. All the rooms on the lower floor were thrown open for them to pass in and out. And after dinner, they were invited upstairs to look at a fine mockingbird my uncle had just brought home. There too the rooms were all thrown open, that they might look in. When I heard them talking on the piazza, my heart almost stood still. I knew this colored man had spent many nights hunting for me. Everybody knew he had the blood of a slave father in his veins, but for the sake of passing himself off for white, he was ready to kiss the slaveholder's feet. How I despised him! As for the constable, he wore no false colors. The duty of his office were despicable, but he was superior to his companion inasmuch as he did not pretend to be what he was not. Any white man who could raise money enough to buy a slave would have considered himself degraded by being a constable. But the office enabled its possessor to exercise authority. If he found any slave out after 9 o'clock, he would whip him as much as he liked, and that was a privilege to be coveted. When the guests were ready to depart, my grandmother gave each of them some of her nice pudding as a present for their wives. Through my peephole I saw them go out the gate, and I was glad when it closed after them. So passed the first Christmas in my den. So I am seeing she's touching on something very important, and of course I love Harriet for her critical thinking skills because she's showing you how proximity to whiteness in terms of the man passing for white, how people use that against their own people to gain access to whatever privilege or power they think they'll get. But I find that her ability to say he's faking it and that he's worse than the other guy, that's internalized self-hate and not a nuanced understanding that he was forced into that, having to choose between passing and showing up as black, and he chose a way to survive. So he was on a survival mission. So at least I wouldn't say he was worse than the other man. He was the same as the other man, or even a little better because the options were fewer. And also she points out classism and the genesis of this idea that I would rather be white than be equal with black people, because from slavery time the point was, hey, at least you're not black. And this thing of if a person had a choice of owning a slave or being a constable, so a choice of living as a parasite on the labor of another human being, they wanted to be the parasite living on the labor of the human being because that gave them status and privilege within that society based. It was a slaveocracy, and to be a part of that ruling class, you'd have to have a slave. So this is the how people lie and talk about slavery was not integral to the American society. It was the way people defined themselves. It was the way that class was determined. And he couldn't be a slaveholder, but at least he could be a white terrorist that could exert power as a constable over the enslaved. So the very identity, the very sense of whiteness is established by, do you have a slave? Don't you have a slave? Do you have power over slaves? That just tells you how slavery was just slavery. It was a slave society. Slavery defined everything. But that's not why I came here, right? I came here to talk about Christmas time and having a Black Christmas. But as always, the point is of reading these narratives is to think critically and to look at how everything, where did the root start? Because in order to root up the weeds and the bad plants, you have to get the whole root system out. And then maybe even sometimes throw concrete into the soil so it can never grow again. But you tell me what you think about this Black Christmas. Thanks so much for listening.